Hi there and welcome back. I'm Jen Sorensen and today I want to talk to you about how I label my quilts. Now everyone has a different way of labeling their quilts and it's really a personal preference, but there are a few things that I like to do personally with my quilt labels so that they have the right information in them. So what do I like to put in them? Quilt title, the maker, designer, quilter, the date it was complete, and any sort of information that may be necessary about the quilt, materials used that's important to highlight, the story behind it. Those are all some of the things that I like to include, as well as ways to get in touch with me. Because I do send some of my quilts off to quilt shows, I like to have some of that contact information there. Email address, phone number, Instagram handle, website, any of that stuff where people can get in touch with you if for some reason your quilt gets lost. Now I used to put my address on to the quilt, but I've moved. So what I found is the best way to get in touch with me, my phone number doesn't change, my email doesn't change, my website hasn't changed. Those are easy ways for people to get in touch with me. So let me show you how I go about doing it. I like to print my labels on fabric out of the printer. So here you can see I've printed the name that was I made this, the date. Sometimes I'll include the dimensions and then a story about it. And this I really just easily printed onto fabric using freezer paper. So I've blocked out my personal information. Here's how you can do that. I have a strip of fabric that is about 9 inches wide or so. I'm gonna press this and I'm gonna use starch because when I put this through my printer, I find it works better if the fabric's a little bit more stiff. So I'm gonna go ahead and starch this. And here's a tip for you. I spray some starch on one side, and now I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna iron press on the other side. That's gonna prevent that white residue that sometimes happens when you starch fabric. You can also let it dry a little bit, that tends to help. But this is gonna help make the fabric a little bit more stiff so that it's gonna be easier to run through the printer. All right, next up, I'm gonna take some good old freezer paper, pull out a roll, a little bit, and I have this ruler here that I love for this. It's 8.5 inches wide, which is exactly the width of a piece of paper. I'm gonna put this down and I'm actually gonna cut a piece of freezer paper that's a little bit more than 8.5 inches wide. I like maybe about, I estimate about 9 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave about 1/2 inch on the other side of my ruler, and I'm gonna cut this off. This is also why I like to make sure that my piece of fabric is about 9 inches wide as well, because I wanna make sure that everything is covered in the freezer paper, and I'm gonna trim this down after. All right, I'm gonna unfold this because I just did a width of fabric strip, and this is great to do with scraps. If you have an extra scrap of fabric from a quilt, save that and use that for your label. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna take the waxy side, so the shiny side I'm gonna place down onto the fabric, and I'm gonna iron this down. Avoid the selvage, we're gonna cut that off. And I'm gonna keep my iron moving. And I'm just gonna keep pressing down, move it around, get it on there pretty good. All right, I think that's pretty good. Let's bring this back over, and I'm gonna cut on the fabric side because I want this to cool a little bit before I use it. I'm gonna take my ruler, again, 8.5 inches wide, the width of a piece of fabric. It's perfect. You can use larger, you're just gonna have to trim a little bit. So let's flip this around. I'm gonna take my ruler and I'm gonna line up the 11 inches to just above the selvage. And I'm gonna center this a little bit. Make sure, I'm gonna flip over to make sure that I've got freezer paper on both sides. And now I'm just going to trim this up. So I just did 2 sides, and now I can turn this over and do the other two sides. And I'm gonna line the edge of my ruler here along the edge of the fabric. And I'm gonna do the bottom edge at the 11-inch mark. Now, if you're in Europe, or if you're somewhere else that doesn't do the 8.5 by 11 fabric, do A4, whatever that measurement is, you can adjust it. And now I'm gonna do the other two sides. So here I have a piece of fabric, and I have freezer paper on the back. It's very stiff. This is gonna feed into my printer, and I feed it in fabric side down, and it will feed up and print right on here, regular ink, just a regular printer. I sometimes like to go back and give this another press. I wait until this is completely cool though before I print, because that's gonna really make sure that this sticks. And after you print this out, you can just take the freezer paper off, cut this down, and then I like to hand sew it to the back of my quilt. You can piece this in before you do the quilting, whatever you want to do, but this is a really easy way of going ahead and printing a label so that you know you have it. Sometimes if I have a little scrap of fabric left over while I'm piecing, I'll actually print the label so that I have no excuse. So like this is one that I still haven't actually finished quilting, even though the date says 2019, don't judge. I may reprint this so that it's more accurate because time got away from me when I was moving. But the more I have this easily ready to go, and I might create a stack of these if I've got some extra fabric around, so that again, I have no excuse not to label it, because people deserve to know some information about your quilts. You've put all this time and effort into making them. Why not share your story with everyone else? I know I've got a stack of quilts behind me that they're a little bit past being made. They've been done for a little while, so I need to go label them and a few others that aren't here and make sure that forever they will be known as being made by myself. And this is really important if you are getting a quilt appraised. I had one appraised and I forgot to put the date on my label. This was back in the early 2010s or so. And I've learned since then, because the appraiser actually couldn't tell when it was made, and it possibly impacted the value of it. So if you're making things that are really intricate, those are important things to note. I'll put all these details in the comments below so that you can see what I recommend that you include, and I will go ahead and show you what this looks like completed. All right, I'm back, and I have 3 labels printed on one piece of fabric, 8.5 by 11 piece of fabric here. Did want to talk about what happens when it gets jammed. So the first one I put through, it was not fully ironed together and it started to split while it went through the printer. Didn't hurt the printer, no harm foul. You know, you can see it started to peel already really easily. So I just cut another one and it went right through, made sure it was really ironed well. I like to use really straightforward fonts. I don't like to complicate it too much, but you could actually make this incredibly elaborate. You could add some graphics, some images. I've even actually, when I had a challenge for a design that was based off of a photograph, I printed that photograph and I made sure this was white fabric. I printed that onto the label. So it told that story. You could really be as creative as you want here. So I hope that really helped you. My question to you is, do you always label your quilts? Or are you like me where there's a quilt in here from 2013 that I am just now labeling and it is 2020? Or are you more like me? I'm gonna be better, I promise. All right, I hope this helped inspire you. Get out there, get creative, and I hope you have a great day. Happy quilting, everyone.